City.
Actually, that's spot on.
It is spot on.
All the competition that try to compete.
Everything is spot on.
The Pittsburgh Steelers won their first 11 games of the season, but then lost 2 in a row. The question of today at SOS discussion is, are the Pittsburgh Steelers a fluke? I'm going to start with John for this one.
No, they're not a fluke, and this is a crazy question. One, they're 11-2. They have the second best record in the league outside of the Kansas City Chiefs, who are the reigning Super Bowl champions. You look at the two teams they've lost to. They lost to the Washington football team, and I know nobody wants to put respect on the Washington football team's name, but they have one of the best defenses in the league, and, guess what? They're winning their division, right? Who else did they lose to? The Buffalo Bills on the road in Buffalo. Oh, guess what? They're winning their division, and they're 9-3. The Steelers are not a fluke. Now, they do have some fatal flaws, right? They can't run the ball at all, right? They did lose 2 of their 4 best defensive players in Devin Bush and Bud Dupree, and nobody's talking about that. Those are huge losses. Obviously, they still have T.J. Watt. Obviously, they still have Minka Fitzpatrick, but you lose your middle linebacker, your young, promising middle linebacker in Devin Bush, and you lose your second best pass rusher in Bud Dupree. And we've seen from watching the Steelers games that they have a huge drop problem. And I don't know if that's something that you can just correct in the middle of the season, but Deontay Johnson leads the league in drops. Eric Ebron has dropped the ball ever since he came in the league. I mean, he should be up there with Travis Kelce with his athleticism, and he's more in that Evan Ingram range because neither one of them can catch the ball. So I just think that the Steelers have some fatal flaws that may prevent them from winning the Super Bowl, but they're still one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. Even though it's a lot of dink and dunk, they have the receivers that can do a lot after the catch. You still have one of the greatest quarterbacks in all time in Ben Roethlisberger, regardless of how you feel about him. And he's orchestrating that offense in a way that we've never seen, getting the ball out of his hands in less than 3 seconds and being really efficient. If it wasn't for receivers dropping the ball, I think Deontay Johnson's had 3 drops in each of the last 2 games. They probably are undefeated still. You know, if it wasn't for Deontay Johnson and Eric Ebron dropping all those passes. And like I said, the 2 teams that they've lost to are playoff teams as of now. They haven't lost to scrub teams, regardless of how you feel about the Buffalo Bills and the Washington football team. So like I said, they have some fatal flaws. I do not think they can get past the Chiefs. And maybe if they were getting to the playoffs, I think they could lose to any team. You know, I think they could lose to the Titans. I think they could lose to the Ravens. I think they could lose to the Bills, and they definitely could lose to the Chiefs, right? But to say that the Steelers are a fluke or that they're not that good because they've lost 2 out of their last 13 games, I think is crazy. I think the Steelers are a really good team. I think they're one of the best teams in the NFL. You know, when you get into the playoffs, when you get into the bracket, when you get into the tournament, you have to run the ball well and play good defense. And we've seen that defense has been able to be exposed. If you watch that Bills-Steelers game, I mean, I don't know what was said at halftime, but I just know the word Stephon Diggs was said at halftime because they came out and every pass went to Diggs after that. I had him in fantasy, and it wasn't enough. You know, I lost to Jamar, but my God. I mean, like, it seemed like every play in the second half was Diggs. And for some reason, they were playing him one-on-one. But like I said, they have some fatal flaws that I think will probably prevent them from winning the Super Bowl. But, I mean, when you got Patrick Mahomes and the weapons he has in Kansas City, Steelers might not have no flaws and still not be able to beat them. But I still think they're the second best team in the league, and they just ran into 2 juggernauts the last 2 weeks that had good matchups against them, really good defenses. They played really well on defense. Obviously, the Bills have been doing that all year. You know, they're Hail Mary away from being 10-2. They're spreading everybody out, and Josh Allen is, you know, with his 70% completion percentage, he's been doing that to everybody, right? Spreading everybody out, going 4 wide, 5 wide, and just making the right decision. So I think they just ran into 2 really good teams. They've dealt with some injuries, dealt with some COVID stuff with some running backs missing time. Like I said, they're missing 2 of their 4 best players on defense, and they've lost to 2 division winners, right? But I don't think it's time to panic on the Steelers. They're extremely well coached, extremely well ran. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and those 3 things are the keys to making runs in the playoffs, right? And they have the pedigree. The Steelers, they've been competitive since the 70s, so in no way are they a fluke. They've lost to 2 really good teams. They're still 11-2. They still have the second best record in the league, and they're going to make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think John pretty much covered it all. I think starting the season out, the Bills not the Bills. Pittsburgh had everything working for them. And so now when you lose key players like Bud Dupree and things like that, they've fallen onto the circumstances that a lot of other teams had early on. And so with that, you face losses like this. I think it'd be different if they would have got blown out by Washington. They only lost by 6. If they got blown out by the Bills, they only lost by 11. Bills. So with things like that, I wouldn't say they're a fluke right now. I think things were just going their way earlier in the season. Now, at this juncture of the season, they're liable to lose the division to the Browns. The Browns are heating up this season, and I never thought I'd be having this type of conversation about the Cleveland Browns. Here we are. The Steelers are likely to lose that division. I think that last game is going to tell it all. And I look forward to them making the playoffs and seeing what they can do, how they can combat those losses in the playoffs.
I think this is a complicated question, honestly. I know you guys really summed it up pretty simply, so it makes like, oh man, Darren, you're a simpleton. But no, I think it's a complicated question in the sense of what do you define as a fluke? Do I think they're as good as their record? No, I don't. I don't think that they are a 11-2 record. I don't believe that that's the ball club that I'm seeing every week. But do I think they're a 7-6 team? No, I don't. And when they say fluke, that's kind of how I think it comes off as, is this team just middle of the pack? No, I think they're one of the better teams. The problem is on offense, they've had struggles for the majority of the year. They can't run the ball. They cannot run the ball at all. They don't have an offensive line that is that good and can protect for deeper shots. And I'm not so sure that Ben R at his age right now I think he's dealing with 2 knee injuries, so he can't be mobile. He just came off of elbow surgery and he's older. So bad offensive line, banged up arm for your older quarterback. It's going to be hard to do deep shots. You're dropping the ball every 5 seconds. One of my favorite moments in sports media is Solomon Wilcox on NFL Network back in the day. And I think he might have been talking about Brandon Marshall, who had a drop problem for a little bit on at that time period. And he said he dropped more balls than Jay-Z dropped records. And I it's always stuck with me. It's never left me. So that's what I think of when I see these Pittsburgh receivers. They continue to drop balls. They drop. You cannot do that if you can't hit over the top consistently, if you can't run the ball, because these quick passing games, that's basically you're running the ball. So you keep dropping the ball. I don't care if Deontay Johnson can move with the ball in his hand. It doesn't matter. And the biggest is all of these things are maximized by the fact that you look at the defensive side of the ball, and they've been elite. Ask my fantasy team. I know they've been elite since we're talking about fantasy over there. They had Bud Dupree. Bush went down. Devin Bush's backup, Robert Spillane, who picked off Lamar early in that game, went down. And then you look at last week, Joe Hayden wasn't playing. Stephon Diggs is a good receiver, great receiver. I love Stephon Diggs, but he's not playing that. He's not having that type of game as Joe Hayden's out there. So even that there's a lot of factors in this. So the injuries have totaled up, and outside of Joe Hayden, all of this thing is pretty much for the rest of the year. So with the defense dealing with injuries and that offense struggling period, has nothing to do with health. I don't think they're as good as their 11-2 record comes off, but do I think they're a fluke? No, they still have grit. They still are extremely well coached, because as we're talking about these people on each side of the ball, Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in the league. You know, that I'm not saying he's one of the best black coaches. He is one of the best coaches in the NFL. And he knows how to get things out of people. But if you're sitting here like, oh my God, the Steelers are not who we thought they were, I'm going to say that you're not listening. Because hell, the Steeler players, the Steeler people have been telling you for week after week after week, we're not that good. And I think we thought that it was just one of those things where teams are trying to keep themselves motivated when they're undefeated. No, they saw the flaws that they had. They acknowledged them. And if you didn't want to acknowledge them, you were probably just being willfully blind. But the Steelers have had problems for the majority of the year. Now the question is, can they correct it or at least try to mask it going into the playoffs? My answer to that question, I don't think they are. Fluke, also don't think they are.
Yeah. So, Darian, first of all, I got to disagree with you. And maybe this is just because I'm a huge Diggy fan, but Stephon Diggs, I think, and if you haven't heard this name before, you're going to hear it now. Brian Daboll, offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, one of the best offensive minds in football. He'll be a head coach soon, right? But when you're spreading, first of all, when is the last time we've seen the Bills run the ball? Like I heard that they don't run the ball at all. They literally just go 4 or 5 wide. And when you're doing that, even if you're playing zone, you can isolate receivers at some point. And so I think Stephon Diggs would have had that game regardless of who was out there, right? Because he just got them feet, man. He can get open, like anybody. Like he can get open. But two things
I do want to say something. I didn't say this when I was talking. Kudos to the Bills because you did that and you pointed that out. The Bills are a really good team, and I know that we're focusing on the Steelers, but I just want to double down on what John said earlier. Some respect needs to be placed to the Bills and talk about how much of a quality team they are. So I didn't mention that, but John did a great job mentioning, hey, they're not losing the scrubs. And the Bills are really a team that needs to be discussed more often, but we'll stick with the Steelers. But go ahead.
Yeah, shout out to my Madden team. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the Buffalo Bills. And what I was going to say too is, right, like we got to talk about the context, right? And I think that's important for us as media members to talk about the context, right? We can't just say the Steelers lost, right? You got to talk about who they lost to, how they lost to the teams, right? We talked about the drops. Like I said, Deontay Johnson has had 3 drops each in the last couple of games, right? Eric Ebron has dropped balls, right? If without those drops, they continue to move the ball down the field, right? Look at the game last night. If it wasn't for Lamar Jackson being able to come in on 4th and 5 and make a heroic play, that Hollywood Brown drop on 3rd down is way more crucial. We're probably talking about that all day is the reason they lost, right? Drops kill drives the same way that sacks and turnovers do. That's a huge thing. And another thing that's not being mentioned is the fact that the Steelers have had to play 3 games in 2 weeks because of COVID. Their Steelers-Ravens game got postponed almost a week. I can't remember how long, but it got postponed. They had to come back in like 4 days and play the Washington football team on a Monday, and then come back and play one of the best football teams in the league on that Sunday. We can't sit here and act like that didn't affect them in any way, especially when they had to travel to play Baltimore and travel to play Buffalo. So we need to add the context, right? They're not just losing. They're not just falling apart. These are things that are affecting them as well. Like I said, they're an 11-2 football team that has dealt with injuries, major drops, which is a correctable problem. And they've also had a lot of their schedule altered, probably almost more than any other team besides the Titans, due to COVID, right? So these are 3 major factors that are working against them as well. I just think that because they've lost 2 in a row and people were already skeptical about the Steelers and their long-term projection of could they beat the Chiefs, could they represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, could they ultimately win it? You know, now people are kind of doubling down like, oh, see, I told you they're not that good, right? Like I said, I still think they're the second best team in the league, and that's because of the pedigree, right? The pedigree, we've seen the Steelers, right? For time and time again, even last year when they didn't have a quarterback, they were 8-8, you know? And they put a consistent good product on the field, and that's what they've been doing all year. The 2 teams they've lost to are currently in first place in their division. So Fluke, no, by any means, right? I don't think, even if they would have went 16-0, I would that they're the second best team in the league now after they've lost 2 games. That's where they already were for me. So I think it's a huge overreaction, the way people are acting like the Steelers aren't the Steelers. Darian said that Mike Tomlin has come out repeatedly and said, we can't catch the ball, we can't run the ball, and we need to be better. The players have also said that. All they're doing is showing us what we already know that they are. But at this point, every team has a major flaw besides the Chiefs, right? And so I think the Steelers just are who we thought they were, and they've ran into 2 really well-coached and well-executed teams the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs
Definitely some
would have
interest.
been good measure. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jamal.
No problem. Any more topics we want to hit on before we get out to the next one? Okay, well, definitely some good points made on everybody on this panel. I have to say, I'm still surprised that Big Ben has returned and been this impressive this late in his career. So much left in the NFL season, and we still have a lot of playoffs left to be done when we get to it. So tell us what y'all think in the comment section and hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see y'all next time.
We thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to check out more shows here on this YouTube page, such as SOS Discussions or My Point Exactly. And most of all,
keep watching Spot On Sports!
it's a new wave of sports that's sweeping the nation. We're not just accurate, it's spot on.